How's it going, my truant people? DrSlaking, the Slacking Doctor, back for week 2, I believe, of the UBL. And this week, your Bowland Bovines are taking on Sarene Grace and her Chicago Shaymin-Sky. I always want to say that wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Chicago Shaymin-Sky. And as you can see, we are jumping straight into battle with this one. And like normal, we had a team builder go up yesterday. I'm probably going to continue that for the rest of the UBL season, so please go and check out the team builder if you haven't already and let me know what you think. But for those of you that aren't too fussed about team builders and are just here for the battles and skip ahead of them usually anyway, I will quickly tell you what we have on the team. So we have a banded Infernape, we have a Yachi fairly bulky Salamence with Intimidate, we have a Fizdef Cofagrigus, we have a Scarf Diggersby, which unfortunately, because of the way it was genned, it does not have return. There's a whole situation there. And then we have a Pixie Plate, fairly offensive Whimsicott. Well, kind of balanced Whimsicott, a lot of bulk as well, to be fair. And then finally, we have a relatively speedy, bulky Shucker Metagross. So, with rocks, try and get rocks up. Look at my opponent's team. Straight away, I noticed they didn't bring the Kyurem, which is amazing because that really frees up Metagross to only have to check the Sylveon. Also, looking at Infernape in this matchup, I do need to break down the Mandibuzz and the Blastoise, so getting rocks up would certainly be very useful. And I need to be very careful of that Ditto, not least because, as I've said, our Diggersby doesn't really have return, but that Ditto probably does have max happiness, which means that it will be able to reverse sweep me with return. So that's a little bit problematic. I do need to be careful of that, as essentially I've just given myself 3 moves and my opponent 4 moves, which is definitely not ideal. As I said in the team builder, Aquarius, thank you for genning my team. All of the Pokemon in this battle are going to be nicknamed Aquarius because they did that when they genned it, but they helped me out last minute, so I'm not going to complain. I had some technical issues with genning. It was a whole thing. So, anyway, with all that being said, this battle's a little while ago, so my memory isn't perfect, but I believe I lead off with Infernape because the only thing it leads badly against is Lopunny, and if my opponent leads with Lopunny, they're likely to go for a fake out on potential Scarf Infernape, and if I can get them to go for a fake out, I can pivot into Cofagrigus and make them take Rocky Helmet Chip turn 1 for essentially free, because the fake out is going to do not very much to me, and they'll lose their Mummy, so they won't be able to get a big return or high jump kick off into my Cofagrigus. So I really felt like this was the best way of pressuring a potential Mega Lopunny lead. If it doesn't have fake out, it will probably switch out here anyway, starting for Scarf Ape, but there's really nothing for me to lose by going into Pat here and trying to get off the Rocky Helmet Chip, as we do see my opponent stay in, more than likely going for that fake out to try and pressure me. I just want to make sure. No, I don't want that. I want that. Okay, because I know last week we had some black borders around the video, which I thought looked not great, so I'm trying to make sure that we don't have those this time. Hopefully there won't be any, and I don't know really why there was any last week, so I apologise for that. But we do take the fake out, get the Rocky Helmet Chip off, which puts us in range of Earthquake from Diggersby, and crucially also doesn't do anything to Pat. We do then see the Toxic, as I believe I Toxic myself, as if this turn my opponent went for sub. I do have the Psychic to break it next turn, and they wouldn't be Toxicking me this turn, so it didn't really matter either way. But I figured that they could also try and pivot into the Mandibuzz. Excuse me. Or they could try and pivot into the Sylveon or the Blastoise or something like that. So getting off a Toxic just seemed fairly free at this point. We do see the Brutal Swing Tech, which we were expecting, but we are able to just fire off the Psychic here and put this thing really, really low. I don't believe we go for the knockoff because it seemed like my opponent would just stay in, and I knew that they would probably be taking the Brutal Swing from their team builder. We put them really, really low here, and here I could just let Cofagrigus go down to this Brutal Swing, but I don't really feel the need. I know that they're never going to click High Jump Kick or Return here, as it won't affect me because they've already got Mummy instead of Scrappy. So instead, I'm just going to make the pivot into my fairly bulky Whimsicott, because we'll take like nothing from this Brutal Swing, and it means that we manage to maintain Cofagrigus in the back. Even if I just sack it off, that's fine, but more importantly, it's immune to Diggersby's returns. So if the Ditto wants to copy me and try and reverse sweep me with Scarf Return, I now have Cofagrigus that can take that. So yeah, I do take extra chip on my Whimsicott, but I think that this was by far my best play there to eat up that Brutal Swing, and we get to see the Lopunny go down. Here I fire off the Moonblast. I am Pixie Plate. This should do a chunk. I never for 1 minute expected Roselli Berry in prep. I thought this thing would be Fizdef to take on Ape for sure, but this makes perfect sense because Roselli Berry, Pixie Plate Whimsicott we knew offensively was great in this matchup, so I just thought that would catch my opponent off guard, but not at all. I knew that I could eat up this Brave Bird anyway, more than likely, because I am a fairly bulky Whimsicott. My opponent, although would KO me here, which is Fair enough, but I did have enough bulk to always live that. And we can just fire off 2 Moonblasts here. And the reason that I'm happy to trade Storm for all this damage on this Mandibuzz is because now, looking at my Diggersby's Earthquakes, because obviously we don't have return on Scarf Diggersby, but looking at my Scarf Diggersby's Earthquakes, suddenly because they didn't bring the Electros and this thing is so low, if I can get Rocks up, especially with that Brave Bird chip, which I thought would take them out, but I miscalculated that, or maybe it was a damage roll on the Moonblast or something, I don't know. But regardless, yeah, it looks like they either sack it here, or they give me massive damage on Blastoise, or even potential damage on Sylveon, which isn't that physically bulky. But instead they just sack this, so it would have been dead to rocks as I say on re-entry anyway. So either way, Scarf Diggersby's Earthquake now is looking incredible. The most important thing I need to find out is this thing Scarf? Because if this Victini is Scarf, then I've got something to be worried about. But I don't know yet. I don't know yet whether this thing is or not. So I'm just going to pivot out into our Salamence, into Emiliano, get off the Intimidate. And it turns out to be a fully special Victini as it goes for the Psychic here. And actually gets a crit. And this is pretty huge. Because now I'm faced with a difficult choice where I can either Roost, predicting my opponent switch out and try and scout for Scarf Salamence. Or I can think that they potentially have run their calcs and might have seen that I'm max HP and so assume that I don't have any speed and that I wouldn't be Scarf max HP. Certainly Scarf max HP isn't a bad set in this matchup and I don't think that it is something that could be ignored. But if it, it's something that people sometimes don't scout for. Once they see max HP they think, that won't be Scarf, and they stay in. But regardless, I was like, well, if I lose my Salamence here, I'm just losing it anyway. There's not a lot I can do. The Intimidate isn't that useful given that this Victini isn't physical, so I don't need to preserve the Intimidate. However, I kind of thought about this after the fact, and I was thinking to myself, well, I still have Ape that can revenge kill a Diggersby Earthquake Sweep with Banded Mach Punch. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, actually, this kind of was a bit of a choke play, because I could potentially have been reverse swept by my own Diggersby if Ditto had scarfed into it and I'd lost a speed tie. I could potentially have been swept by Earthquake. So yeah, a little bit of a misplay maybe here by me just going for the Roost, but I did think that my opponent should probably scout for the Scarf, which they did, and that gave me a free Roost here. So they do just go into this thing, presumably predicting Earthquake if I'm going to go for anything offensively, and being able to be immune to that with the, of course, Flying type that they copy from me. I do just go for the Quake there. I don't know why I didn't go for the Roost. I guess I thought maybe I could live a Psychic, maybe it was a damage roll or something. I'm surprised by that. I thought there was no way I would, but I don't know. Either way, here I'm able to go for the Roost, and like I say, I do think there was a little bit of a choke play by me, probably not preserving this thing and not going into, say, like the Cofagrigus and just sacking that, but then return became much more dangerous. So it was just a bit of a tricky situation, and I knew with my own Scarf Diggersby, if I was careful, I could potentially win this. But we get our thing Toxic, which is not great, and here I'm just going to fire off a Toxic of my own into this. And I believe, did I also get the Ditto Toxic while I was talking? No, I didn't. I didn't get the Ditto Toxic. I just fire off the Toxic here into Blastoise. Which isn't too bad. It's not too bad at all. We haven't got Rocks up or anything, so this thing isn't going to Rapid Spin on us. That's something that we can be fairly sure of. I'm expecting here to be something along the lines of Assault Vest, Rapid Spin, Scold, maybe Ice Beam, and maybe Dark Pulse for the Cofagrigus. Not too sure. But either way, I think I can pivot fairly safely out here. And just bring in Aquarius, shock, and just bring in the Cofagrigus, because this thing can really take up any hits from this thing, I suspect. But actually my opponent goes for the really nice double, and goes out into the Ditto again. I'm not sure exactly what they were predicting to come in here, if they were predicting anything at all, perhaps worried that I would just try and Roost stall them down with their Blastoise, making the toxic damage rack up. But regardless, we get in our Cofagrigus, and this is a pretty good situation for me, because I can just go for the Pain Split here, and I can get this thing back to a much better range of health, where I can actually take on the Scarf Diggersby that I could potentially come up against much better. So that's amazing for us. And of course, I don't have Shadow Ball on my own Cofagrigus set, so I know that I can't be beaten by my own Cofagrigus. And if they stay in here, I'm just going to go for the knockoff, because getting rid of the Scarf on this Ditto, which we do here, is incredible. That means that my own Diggersby no longer sweeps me. So this is the ideal situation. This is the point where I'm like, okay, the only concern I have left to stop my Scarf Diggersby from sweeping is if that Victini is Scarf, or if I let that Victini get off a Flame Charge. In either of those scenarios, I'm in a pretty bad spot. Here, I'm just going to go for the Pain Split, get myself back to as good range of health as possible, and my opponent pivots out into Blastoise, which is incredible, because if this thing is AV, second 2 turns of Toxic now, and had a huge Pain Split off, taking it below 50%, which is great for Diggersby. All I've got to really do at this point point in the game is just pivot around, try and rack up the chip on the crucial things, and then get Diggersby and then click Earthquake. Some chip on Sylveon probably is going to be necessary, but I can potentially force that with my Infernape being able to get close combat and things like that, potentially lure in the being able to lure in the Sylveon. So here I just go into Diggersby because it basically guarantees me a KO. If my opponent goes out into the Sylveon, it's not going to be able to take 2. So this is just a way of me guaranteeing a knockout here. They do have the Aqua Jet, which was great prep. I did not expect that at all, but it doesn't do too much, and I don't need a specific range of health on this Diggersby. This Diggersby just will beat everything with a little bit of chip on the Sylveon anyway, so I'm not really too concerned about chip damage like that. Then the Sylveon does come out, and obviously I cannot take this on directly. I needed this thing to switch in and take one first, or I need to chip it down some way. So instead, I'm going to preserve our Diggersby in the back. We're going to keep warring around and go out into Big Steve. Big Steve's going to hit the field. Really here, I just need to get rocks up, get some chip off on the Victini, try and stop that thing from being able to like flame charge, sweep me or whatever, and I still need to figure out if it's Scarf. The fact that my opponent scouted for the Scarf on my Salamence says to me that the Victini is almost certainly not Scarf. I would find that highly unlikely that they would then scout for my Scarf. They wouldn't just go for the speed tie, unless it was a speed creeping Victini or a modest Victini or something like that, which is very possible, but still, the fact that they didn't risk going for that second time they scouted for the Scarf suggests to me that it's probably not, but we've still got to try and play around for it. So I believe that we did just manage to get rocks off there, and here comes in the Ditto, and we are now running the risk of a speed tie as we go for the Meteor Mash trying to catch the Sylveon. We're unable to catch it, but this thing does come in, and we basically just, one of us is going to win the speed tie and get the Earthquake off and kill the other one. I don't mind too much because I just go back into Diggersby and force another KO, so I don't lose too much in this situation. It's always just, this game is just essentially sack something, get Diggersby in, get a KO, sack something, get Diggersby in, get a KO. That's pretty much how we're playing this at this point. And even in the back, we still have Infernape, which can click Stone Edge to potentially win if this thing basically locks into a Psychic move. It can't beat my Metagross, and if this thing locks into a Fire move, if it is Scarf, it can't beat my Salamence, or my Infernape for that matter. So my thinking here was, as long as I keep things that are immune to both of these things, or not immune, but resist both this thing's stabs, then I can't really lose to Scarf Victini anyway. Yes, I might not be able to get a Diggersby sweep, but I shouldn't lose to Scarf Victini. So we're just going to pivot out into the Salamence here, into Miliano, and get off the Intimidate. As my opponent goes for the Blue Flare, and I'm like, that's fine. If this thing is now choice locked into this, that means that my Infernape will beat it. And if it isn't choice locked into it, it means that my Diggersby will beat it. So either way, we're going to be fine here. As my opponent pivots out again, which really surprised me. So I'm like, maybe this thing is Scarf. I'm really confused by this because they could definitely have just KO'd me there. I think at this point, oh no, they hadn't seen my damage output. So I could have been max speed and it could have been a speed tie, to be fair. I don't think I'd clicked Earthquake on anything yet. So that's fair enough, that they just, again, don't want to risk the speed tie because Victini is crucial to them winning this game. But this does allow me to get off the Toxic on Sylveon. The reason I went for Toxic there is because if they stayed in, they were going to KO me, and if they switched out, they were going to go Sylveon, and I would rather get Sylveon on a timer than just get a bit of Earthquake chip that they could wish off anyway. So that's why I just went for the blanket kind of Toxic there. It was always my best play because I was either dying or getting this thing poisoned. And now, because we do outspeed with that Earthquake chip, plus the Toxic chip racking up, we can again force a KO with Scarf Diggersby, and then at that point, we still have Metagross that can take the Psychic move from Victini, and we still have Infernape that can take the Fire move from Victini. So if it is Scarf Victini that can outspeed Diggersby, we 100% have just forced the checkmate position at this point. The only way I think we could possibly lose is if we miss all of our Stone Edges with Infernape and end up struggling ourselves to death or something. I don't see any other way we can lose. So this essentially forces checkmate outside of extreme hacks, as I don't think there's any one move that Victini could Scarf into. Something like Glaciate wouldn't be able to kill the Metagross or the Infernape, so I really don't think this will have any coverage. Bolt Strike, for example, wouldn't kill the Diggersby, obviously would be immune, but it turns out that my opponent is not Scarf Victini anyway, and we do manage to just fire off the Earthquake there and KO this thing. So we do pick up the 3-0 win, I believe there. I think it's 3-0. I think it's, was Confagriga still alive? I don't think so. I think it was 3-0 win. Regardless, GG to my opponent. My opponent definitely played really, really well, making some nice plays with Victini to make sure that thing stayed around, as it was the biggest threat to my team. Definitely some great prep with the Roselli Bay Mandibuzz, did not expect that at all. But luckily for us, we were able to get rid of that Mandibuzz early, which just opened up the game for Diggersby. It was just a waiting game at that point to make sure that we positioned everything correctly for Diggersby to do what Diggersby does and clean up the game. So yeah, definitely GG to Sarene. I thought this played super, super well, and this was a tough battle for sure, but one that I thoroughly enjoyed. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it too. If you did, let me know down below. Shout out again to my whole front office for helping me prep and stuff. I did shout them out in the team builder, but I think I forgot here, so shout out to them. And a huge thank you as well, I can't believe I forgot to say this earlier in the battle, but a huge thank you as well to Skyranda, I believe, who recorded this battle for me. Regardless, guys, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for loafing around with me, and I'll catch you again next time.